North Korea, officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, occupies the northern half of the Korean peninsula in East Asia. It has an estimated population of around 26 million people, though precise figures are difficult to verify due to the government's tight control of information. The population is ethnically homogeneous, with nearly all citizens identifying as Korean and speaking the Korean language, which is written in the native Hangul script. There are virtually no ethnic minorities, and immigration is almost non-existent, resulting in a society that is culturally uniform and insulated from external influence. Urbanization in North Korea is relatively high compared to some developing countries, with roughly 60% of the population living in towns and cities. Pyongyang, with an estimated 3 million residents, is the largest and most developed city, reserved primarily for those of higher political and social standing under the country's strict residence regulations. The country's demographic structure shows a relatively young population, though the birth rate has been declining in recent years due to economic difficulties and food insecurity. Despite the hardships that influence living standards, North Korea's population remains resilient, sustained by strong community bonds and state-directed social structures that define where people live, work, and belong within the country's unique system. North Korea in the past decade remains one of the most closed and tightly controlled societies in the world. Daily life for its citizens is shaped by a mix of authoritarian political rules, economic scarcity, and a unique cultural environment distinct from any other country. People live under the constant presence of state propaganda and leadership imagery, yet they also find ways to carry out ordinary tasks like working, studying, and socializing. The result is a life that can appear normal on the surface with routine and tradition, but is fundamentally constrained by surveillance, ideological demands, and material hardships. For most North Koreans, the day begins early with compulsory obligations often before their actual work. In many neighborhoods and workplaces, groups of citizens gather for morning ceremonies or exercises where they sing patriotic songs or recite oaths of loyalty to the country's leader. After these collective rituals, people proceed to their jobs or schools, which are assigned by the state rather than chosen freely. A culture of regimented schedules and communal activities leaves little room for personal pursuits, and even leisure time is frequently spent in structured group settings or fulfilling civic duties. Every morning, the state's presence is literally heard by citizens as well. In many neighborhoods, loudspeakers or wired radio systems play the national wake-up tune or relay a dawn message extolling productivity and loyalty. Most homes have a fixed-line radio speaker that cannot be turned off, ensuring that everyone hears the official news and propaganda throughout the day at set times. This pervasive audio backdrop means that from the moment they wake, North Koreans are enveloped in the narrative that the government wants them to live by, from patriotic songs at breakfast to recaps of the leader's guidance in the evening. The concept of a weekend or independent hobby is not as clear-cut in North Korea as it is elsewhere. Officially, North Koreans may have one day of rest each week, but often that day is taken up by community labour projects or required political study meetings. Many citizens use their spare time to tend private gardens or engage in small-scale trading to supplement their income, since state rations and salaries are usually insufficient. What might be considered hobbies in other countries, such as listening to music or watching films, can become clandestine activities in the North Korean context due to strict information controls. Every aspect of a North Korean citizen's appearance is shaped by the state's strict social codes, which reflect both ideological control and cultural uniformity. The government dictates how people should dress, style their hair, and even behave in public, ensuring that no one stands out or adopts what the regime considers capitalist or decadent trends. One of the most well-known examples of such control is the list of state-approved hairstyles. For men, there are typically around a dozen officially sanctioned cuts, ranging from short back and side styles to simple crew cuts, all designed to appear clean and modest. Men are discouraged from growing their hair long, dyeing it, or adopting foreign styles. Authorities have at times even broadcast warnings about how unkempt or bourgeois hair reflects moral decline. For women, the permitted styles are somewhat more varied, but still heavily regulated, usually between 15 and 20 options depending on age and marital status. Married women are encouraged to wear shorter, practical hairstyles, while unmarried women may keep their hair slightly longer, but still within conservative limits, avoiding anything that looks Western or glamorous. Clothing choices are also carefully policed, especially in public spaces. Citizens are expected to dress modestly and in a way that demonstrates respect for socialist values, with simple colours and conservative designs being the norm. Blue jeans, for instance, are considered a symbol of American culture and have been banned for decades as unpatriotic attire. Men generally wear dark suits or work uniforms depending on their occupation, while women favour traditional dresses or plain skirts and blouses that cover the shoulders and knees. The clothing people own often depends on what they receive through state distribution or what they can find in local markets, with imported or flashy items being rare and sometimes punishable if associated with foreign influence. On national holidays and official events, attire takes on a ceremonial dimension that reflects reverence for the state and its leaders. Citizens often wear badges displaying the portrait of Kim Il-sung or both Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Il pinned over their hearts, an item that is treated with the utmost respect and must never be misplaced or damaged. During parades or celebrations, people might wear the traditional Korean hanbok, though even these garments are tailored in accordance with officially approved patterns and colours. For daily life, uniforms dominate. Students wear them at school, workers in factories and offices don standardized outfits, and soldiers are seen everywhere in the same olive tones, creating a visual landscape of disciplined uniformity. Beyond appearance, the regime also regulates behavior and public demeanor as part of what it calls cultural hygiene. Displays of affection such as hugging or kissing in public are frowned upon, loud or boisterous behavior is discouraged, and citizens are expected to bow to statues and portraits of the leaders whenever they pass them. Smoking is permitted for men, but traditionally discouraged for women, and even social activities like weddings or gatherings must include some formal expression of loyalty to the country or its leadership. In essence, life in North Korea extends the state's ideological framework into the smallest details of existence. How people look, dress, and carry themselves is both a declaration of obedience and a constant reminder that individuality exists only within the boundaries drawn by the regime. Despite these constraints, people do find ways to relax and socialize within the limits allowed. After work hours, it is common for co-workers or friends to gather for a simple meal or drink if resources allow, reflecting a long-standing social drinking culture. Home life remains important, and families often spend evenings together sharing stories or listening to the radio, albeit only to the sanctioned channels. There is also a tradition of holding small celebrations for personal milestones like birthdays, though these are typically modest and always mindful of the broader political environment. Military service in North Korea is not only mandatory, but considered one of the most defining obligations of citizenship, deeply embedded in the country's social and ideological fabric. The regime's policy of Songun, or military first, places the armed forces at the center of national life, giving the Korean People's Army a revered status and making service to it a near sacred duty. Virtually every family has a member who has served or is serving, and fulfilling this obligation is often tied to social standing, career opportunities, and even marriage prospects. The military is portrayed not just as a defense force, but as a political and moral institution that molds citizens into loyal followers of the regime, ready to sacrifice for their leader and nation. For men, military service is compulsory and begins typically at the age of 17 or 18, lasting a minimum of 7 to 10 years, though the exact duration can vary depending on the branch of service and the individual's background. Women were historically exempt, but are now also required to serve for several years, usually from the age of 18 to 23, reflecting the government's increasing militarization of society. Recruitment is not random. It is a carefully managed process that takes into account a person's songbun, their social and political classification, so those from loyal families may be placed in more prestigious posts, while those with unreliable backgrounds are assigned to manual or rural units. Training is rigorous and often harsh, emphasizing endurance, obedience, and ideological purity as much as combat readiness. Recruits undergo long marches, drills, and political indoctrination sessions designed to instill devotion to Kim Jong Un and the Workers' Party of Korea. Despite the hardship, military service is a source of pride for many and is seen as a rite of passage into adulthood. Completion of one's service often brings social benefits, such as improved standing with local authorities, better job assignments, or eligibility to join the ruling party. In cities, military parades and visible patrols serve as reminders of the regime's power, while in the countryside, units help maintain social order and ensure compliance with central directives. The army is not only the cornerstone of defense, but the backbone of governance, education, and propaganda, a reflection of how, in North Korea, every citizen is a soldier in the ideological battle for the state's survival, and the military uniform symbolizes both loyalty and submission to that ideal. Materially, everyday life in North Korea is defined by scarcity for the majority of citizens. Many households, especially outside the showcase capital city, struggle with limited food variety and periodic shortages. A typical daily diet consists mainly of staple grains like rice or corn, accompanied by kimchi or other pickled vegetables, with protein in the form of tofu, eggs, or occasional fish and meat being a rare luxury. Malnutrition and food insecurity have been recurring issues since the famine of the 1990s, and even in recent years, there are reports of families cutting back on meals during lean periods. The country's public distribution system theoretically provides state-rationed food and goods, but it functions unreliably and often cannot meet basic needs. In practice, most citizens have turned to local markets and informal trading to obtain food, clothing, and household items. These markets, known as jangmadang, have grown across the country since the 2000s and represent a semi-legal grey economy that has become essential for survival. A North Korean family's daily life frequently involves some form of buying or selling at a market, or relying on goods that have passed through these unofficial channels. In many cases, women have become prominent breadwinners through market activities, a significant shift in gender roles in a traditionally patriarchal society. Economic conditions in North Korea are marked by stark inequalities and an unusual blending of socialist and informal capitalist practices. A small elite class, especially those residing in Pyongyang or connected to the ruling party, enjoy privileges such as access to better food, consumer goods, and entertainment. At the same time, the majority of people live modestly or in outright poverty, and currency itself can be peculiar. Foreign money like US dollars or Chinese yuan circulates widely for trade because the local North Korean won is unstable and often not trusted for valuable transactions. Rural life differs greatly from life in the relatively better provisioned capital. In the countryside, most people are attached to collective farms or small local industries, and daily work is labour-intensive with little mechanization. Farmers typically rely on oxen to plough fields and carry loads, and planting and harvesting are often done by hand due to chronic fuel and equipment shortages. Villages have few modern conveniences. Electricity might come only a few hours in the evening, if at all, and many homes use outhouses and cook over wood fires, making everyday existence a continual physical challenge. North Korea's geography and climate pose additional trials for its people. Winters are harsh and long, especially in the northern interior, and many households struggle to keep warm with limited fuel. It is not uncommon for families to huddle around small coal stoves or for children to wear coats indoors to fend off the chill. Another unique aspect of life in North Korea is the influence of the Songbun social classification system. Every North Korean is born into a particular societal status based on their family's background and perceived loyalty to the regime, a legacy that dates back to the country's early years. This classification quietly determines many opportunities. Those with loyal Songbun are more likely to be allowed to live in cities, join the ruling party, or attend prestigious universities, whereas those from families with suspect backgrounds, such as former landowners or relatives of defectors, might be relegated to menial jobs in distant provinces. While Songbun is not openly discussed in daily life, its effects are felt everywhere, contributing to a sense that one's path in life can be predetermined by political factors beyond personal control. The effects of Songbun are often visible in the trajectories of individual lives. A person from a family of high-ranking revolutionaries or war heroes is likely to live in Pyongyang, enjoy a university education, and secure a desirable job, all facilitated by their privileged classification. In contrast, someone whose ancestors were landlords had relatives who fled to South Korea, or otherwise earned suspicion, might find themselves barred from advancement and possibly assigned to menial work in remote provinces. These unwritten rules reinforce a hereditary caste-like stratification, where loyalty and family history can outweigh personal talent or effort in determining one's fate. Education in North Korea is both a state priority and a tool for ideological conditioning. Children start school at kindergarten and then attend compulsory education that was extended to 12 years nationwide in the 2010s. The school curriculum includes standard subjects like math, science, and language, but all taught with a heavy dose of political messaging and loyalty to the leadership. From the first moments of the school day, students might bow before portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Il in their classrooms, and then begin lessons that often incorporate examples glorifying the nation's history or the leader's achievements. Memorization of state slogans and ideological tenets is expected of students from a young age. Children learn songs praising the leaders and the homeland, and they participate in rallies or performances on national holidays that reinforce a collective pride and obedience. Beyond academics, schools involve students in many mandatory extracurricular activities that serve the regime's objectives. Tourism in North Korea is one of the most tightly controlled experiences in the world, carefully designed to present the country in a positive light while preventing visitors from seeing anything that contradicts the state's propaganda. Foreigners are only allowed to enter the country as part of organized group tours or through a few approved travel agencies that work under the supervision of the North Korean government. Independent travel is strictly forbidden. Visitors cannot book their own accommodations, explore cities freely, or interact casually with locals. Every step of a foreigner's visit is planned in advance, with approved routes, schedules, and designated guides who accompany them from arrival to departure. Most tourists enter the country through China, flying from Beijing to Pyongyang's Sunan International Airport or taking a train across the border. Upon arrival, visitors are immediately assigned 2 government guides and sometimes a driver who remain with them at all times. These guides serve multiple purposes. They act as interpreters, tour leaders, and minders who ensure that travelers do not stray from the official itinerary or photograph anything deemed sensitive. It is prohibited to wander outside the hotel, speak privately with citizens, or take photos of construction sites, soldiers, or anything that could reflect poorly on the regime. Cameras, phones, and electronic devices may be inspected, and in some cases, tourists are asked to delete pictures before leaving the country. The experience itself is highly curated, focused on monuments, museums, and sites that glorify the leadership and the achievements of the Workers' Party. Visitors are typically shown the Mansu Hill Grand Monuments with their towering statues of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong Il, where they are required to bow and lay flowers as a sign of respect. They may visit the Korean War Museum, the Juche Tower, or model farms and schools, all of which are presented as evidence of national prosperity and unity. Accommodations are usually at designated tourist hotels, such as the Yanggakdo International Hotel in Pyongyang, which is isolated on an island in the Taedong River to prevent guests from interacting freely with residents. Even within the hotel, floors may be monitored by security personnel, and guests are advised not to attempt contact with locals or to leave their rooms without permission. Tourists are also expected to behave with a level of decorum that reflects respect for the country's leaders and its ideology. Mocking or questioning the Kim family, defacing state symbols, or failing to show proper reverence at monuments are considered grave insults. Bringing in religious materials, political literature, or electronic devices capable of accessing foreign media is strictly prohibited, as is distributing anything to locals, including magazines or money. Even a seemingly harmless act such as folding a newspaper with a leader's image in an inappropriate way can be interpreted as disrespect. Foreigners are briefed extensively about these rules before their visit, and tour guides often remind them throughout the trip what is and isn't acceptable. The consequences for violating these regulations can be severe, as illustrated by the tragic case of Otto Warmbier, an American student who visited North Korea in late 2015. Warmbier, a 21-year-old from Ohio, was accused of attempting to steal a propaganda banner from his hotel during a group tour, a charge the authorities framed as a hostile act against the state. He was arrested at the airport while trying to leave the country and later forced to make a televised confession, which many observers believe was coerced. In March 2016, he was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, a punishment grossly disproportionate to the alleged offense. After 17 months in detention, he was returned to the United States in a comatose state and died shortly after, sparking international outrage and further isolating North Korea from the global community. The Warmbier case served as a stark warning about the risks of disregarding even minor rules while in North Korea. Since then, travel advisories from many countries, including the United States, which now bans its citizens from traveling there without special permission, have emphasized the dangers of visiting. Despite this, a small number of tourists still go each year, drawn by curiosity, historical interest, or the desire to glimpse one of the world's most secretive societies. For those who do visit, the experience is surreal, a journey through a place that feels both frozen in time and carefully staged, where every conversation is monitored, every photograph scrutinized, and every moment designed to reinforce the state's narrative. Visitors leave with the understanding that in North Korea, tourism is not a window into the country's reality, but a meticulously choreographed performance that allows outsiders to see only what the regime wishes them to see. Defection from North Korea is one of the most dangerous and desperate acts a citizen can undertake, driven by a longing for freedom, safety, or simply enough food to survive. The country's borders are heavily guarded, and leaving without permission is considered one of the gravest crimes against the state, an act of treason that can result in imprisonment, torture, or even execution. Despite these risks, thousands have attempted to escape over the past few decades, most fleeing across the northern border into China, rather than the heavily fortified demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea. For those who succeed, the journey is fraught with peril at every stage, while for those who fail, the consequences are devastating not only for themselves, but often for their families as well. North Korea law specifies 3 generations of punishment. If you commit a crime, your children and grandchildren will also receive the full brunt of punishment, which often involves a lifetime in prison. The majority of defectors cross the Yalu or Tumen rivers, which mark the frontier between North Korea and China. These rivers freeze over in winter, making them easier to cross, but also exposing defectors to extreme cold and the threat of being spotted by border guards. The North Korean government maintains strict patrols and has installed barbed wire fences, motion sensors, and surveillance posts along the frontier, with orders for guards to shoot anyone attempting to flee. Reaching China does not guarantee safety, as Beijing does not recognize North Koreans as refugees, but rather as illegal migrants. Chinese authorities routinely detain and forcibly repatriate those caught, returning them to North Korea despite international condemnation. Once sent back, defectors face brutal punishment, including interrogation, torture, and confinement in prison camps where conditions are life-threatening. Those suspected of having contact with South Koreans, missionaries, or foreign organizations are treated especially harshly, as the regime considers such actions acts of espionage or collaboration with enemy forces. For some, this results in public executions intended to deter others from attempting to flee. Yet, despite decades of repression, border fortifications and executions, the flow of escapees, though reduced in recent years due to tighter controls, has never entirely stopped, proving that even in one of the most controlled societies on Earth, the human desire for freedom cannot be completely extinguished. The political situation involving North Korea, South Korea, and the United States is one of the most enduring and volatile geopolitical tensions in the modern world. Since the end of the Korean War in 1953, the two Koreas have technically remained at war, separated by the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, and governed by ideologically opposite regimes, one democratic and capitalist in the south, the other totalitarian and communist in the north. Relations between them have swung over the years from cautious dialogue to open hostility, often depending on leadership changes, international pressure, and the broader security climate. The United States, as South Korea's key military ally and the main adversary in North Korean propaganda, plays a central role in this dynamic, with its military presence on the peninsula and its involvement in sanctions and diplomatic negotiations. From the North Korean perspective, the division of Korea is not a settled issue, but a historical injustice left by foreign powers. The regime portrays itself as the legitimate government of the entire peninsula, constantly emphasizing the goal of reunification under Korean control. However, this vision is based on the North's ideological dominance, not equal partnership, and is often used to justify military buildup and domestic repression. South Korea, on the other hand, while constitutionally committed to reunification, focuses on peace, stability, and gradual engagement. Over the years, the two sides have held several high-profile summits and cultural exchanges, but these moments of thaw are repeatedly interrupted by missile tests, border skirmishes, and inflammatory rhetoric. The nuclear weapons program remains the most critical and contentious issue in North Korea's relations with both South Korea and the United States. North Korea began pursuing nuclear technology in the 1980s under Kim Il-sung, framing it as a means of national defense against perceived foreign aggression. After withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, in 2003, Pyongyang accelerated its efforts, conducting its first nuclear test in 2006. Since then, the country has carried out multiple nuclear detonations and developed increasingly sophisticated ballistic missiles capable of reaching not only neighboring countries, but potentially the continental United States. Each test has provoked international condemnation and waves of sanctions aimed at crippling the regime's ability to fund its weapons programs. Despite these sanctions, North Korea has continued to refine its capabilities, claiming that nuclear weapons are essential for its survival and sovereignty. The regime's narrative presents the arsenal as a deterrent against US aggression, drawing on the history of the Korean War and decades of military exercises between the United States and South Korea. This justification resonates domestically, allowing the leadership to portray the nuclear program as a symbol of national pride and resistance to foreign domination. Even as international isolation deepens, nuclear development remains a cornerstone of Kim Jong Un's strategy to maintain leverage and legitimacy both at home and abroad. In recent years, the question of succession in North Korea has quietly moved to the forefront of international interest as Kim Jong Un's health, family dynamics, and political maneuvers raise speculation about who might one day inherit the world's most secretive dictatorship. Kim Jong Un, who assumed power in 2011 after the death of his father, Kim Jong Il, rules through a combination of absolute control, calculated displays of power, and carefully crafted mystique. His leadership continues the Paektu bloodline, a sacred concept in North Korean ideology that links the ruling family's legitimacy to the legendary Mount Paektu, symbolically positioning the Kim family as chosen guardians of the Korean nation. Within this mythic framework, any discussion of succession is not simply political but quasi-religious, framed as the continuation of divine destiny rather than a transfer of authority. Kim Jong Un, still in his early 40s, is believed to be in uncertain health, having faced recurring speculation about heart issues and weight-related ailments. His leadership style, marked by both ruthlessness and public affection toward his family, suggests that he is acutely aware of the need to secure his dynasty's continuity. Over the past few years, he has gradually elevated the public profiles of his sister, Kim Yo-jong, and his young daughter, Kim Ju-ai, both of whom now play visible roles in the regime's image building. Observers note that while Kim Yo-jong exercises real political power behind the scenes, Kim Ju-ai's appearances are designed to remind the nation that the sacred bloodline will endure into a new generation. Together, the three figures form a triangular power structure, each embodying a different dimension of the Kim dynasty's future. Life in North Korea presents one of the most striking contrasts between ideology and reality in the modern world. On paper, the country claims to provide its citizens with free education, universal healthcare, guaranteed employment, and low crime rates, hallmarks of a socialist welfare state. Education is compulsory and accessible to all, and literacy rates are officially reported to be near 100%, reflecting the regime's long-standing emphasis on schooling and indoctrination. Healthcare too is declared free and universal, with hospitals and clinics established across every province. The nation boasts remarkably low levels of street crime compared to most countries, a result not of social harmony but of pervasive surveillance and severe punishments for even minor offences. In this tightly controlled environment, theft, drug use, and violent crimes are rare, largely because the risk of imprisonment or execution outweighs any temptation. Beneath these claims of stability and order, however, lies a far more complex and harsh reality. The education system, while effective in teaching literacy and technical skills, functions primarily as a vehicle for propaganda, shaping students to revere the Kim family and conform to ideological orthodoxy rather than encouraging critical thought or innovation. Healthcare, though free in theory, is severely underfunded, with shortages of medicine, equipment, and even electricity rendering many hospitals ineffective. Ordinary citizens often rely on home remedies or the black market for medical supplies, and malnutrition remains a chronic problem in rural areas. Employment is guaranteed, but wages are so low that most people depend on informal markets to survive, creating a dual economy where the official socialist structure coexists with a thriving underground trade network that sustains millions. The apparent absence of crime also reflects the oppressive reach of the state rather than genuine social peace. Citizens live under constant observation by neighbourhood watch groups, workplace committees, and secret police who report even trivial deviations from the expected norm. Political dissent, smuggling, or consumption of foreign media are treated as serious crimes, punishable by imprisonment or execution, and entire families can be punished under the policy of guilt by association. The fear of state retribution ensures compliance, but extinguishes individuality and freedom, creating a society that appears orderly only because it is silenced. For many, the most serious crimes are not committed by citizens but by the state itself: mass surveillance, forced labour, and the suppression of basic human rights. Despite these systemic flaws, North Korea's people display remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of hardship. One of North Korea's most prominent landmarks and symbols of national pride is the Rungrado 1st of May Stadium. Completed in 1989, it is the largest stadium in the world by seating capacity. The stadium hosts a range of events, but it is best known for the Arirang Mass Games, a vast synchronized performance involving tens of thousands of participants. These mass spectacles combine gymnastics, dance, music, and massive mosaic backdrops created by students flipping colored cards in unison to form patriotic images and slogans. The performances celebrate themes such as national independence, military strength, and the accomplishments of the Kim family, and they are meticulously choreographed over months of training. North Korea stands today as one of the most paradoxical nations on Earth, a place where the ancient, the modern, and the surreal coexist under the shadow of total control. It is a country defined by contrasts, a people who are warm, resilient, and deeply communal, yet bound by a regime that isolates them from the rest of humanity. On the surface, it presents an image of unity, discipline, and pride, with massive parades, monumental architecture, and the image of its leaders dominating every public space. Beneath that facade, however, lies a daily struggle marked by scarcity, censorship, and the quiet endurance of ordinary citizens who continue to live, love, and hope within rigid boundaries. And yet, for all its secrecy and control, North Korea remains profoundly human. Its mountains, markets, songs, and children are real, and so are the stories of those who endure and those who escape. It is a country frozen in time, but not without heartbeat, a living paradox of loyalty and fear, pride and pain. The world's fascination with North Korea often comes from its mysteries, but its reality is not built on enigma. It is built on people trying to survive within a system designed to suppress them. In the end, North Korea is not just a political anomaly. It is a mirror reflecting both the extremes of power and the quiet persistence of humanity.